Alright, welcome to another tier list. Today I'm going to be doing the rare banner units tier list. I did the uncommon banner units a little time before, and I wanted to wait a little bit on the rares because I felt as though, because they're rare and all, I didn't have as much experience with them to really talk to how good they truly are. Now, some of these units I still don't have a ton of experience with, but I feel like I have enough experience now with basically all of these. Maybe there's one or two exceptions to where I feel confident to where they lie on the tier list. Now, a little bit of background. This is for Covenant 10 Titan runs. And this is specifically made for, doing Covenant 10 Titan runs for streaking. So consistency is going to be a lot more important. Right now I'm on a 52 win streak. So I feel like I'm starting to really get a grasp on things. So this is going to be mostly about consistency. So some of the higher ceiling carry units, a lot of them will be rated as good, but I think what you'll find in this tier list is that it's mostly going to be rewarding consistency and just sort of, let's go over the categories. I actually labeled them here. The first category is breaking the rules. These are the units that pretty self-explanatory. I find that these kind of bend the rules of the game in such an impactful way that they're basically always worth taking. So these are going to be units that maybe you'll see aren't necessarily just going to win the game outright for you, but they're going to do something so degenerate that it's pretty much always worth taking them. Now, to speak on what I just said a couple seconds ago about how they're not like solo winning you the game, I don't think there's really a whole lot in Monster Train 2 that does solo win you the game. I think it's kind of different in Monster Train 2 than it was in Monster Train 1. I think that you still do need a lot of different stuff to win. Like, it's not just going to be one unit that's it's not a one-man show like it was in Monster Train 1. So most of the power level of this is coming from consistency and just how much they contribute to a run on average, rather than just being like a solo carry unit or something like that. So anyway, the breaking the rules units are in the highest category. After that, I just have the strong units. These are just units that are powerful. They may not always work, but they're usually very strong. You see them a lot of the time. You're going to be your carries. They're going to be, the high damage scalers or something like that. They're going to be a focal point of your run a lot of the time when you do see them. They're not super universal, and they're not really doing anything that's sort of warping the game, but they're just high consistency, high power units. Category after that is situational. These are units that, as it implies, are not always good. A lot of the time it's dependent. A lot of them you'll see it's dependent on your starter card. Whereas like with half of the starter cards from your clan, so the one variant of your starter card it'll be great with this unit, and then this unit is not so good with the other variant. Not always though. Sometimes it's just units that are very hit and miss if they actually are going to do anything for you or not. Sometimes they're very useful, and sometimes they just do nothing. A lot of rares are kind of like that in a way. Rares are kind of much more specific than uncommons, and they're much more niche in what they actually do, but they have much more powerful effects a lot of the time. So you'll find this probably going to be the biggest group. After that, I have a bit weak. That's pretty self-explanatory. There's units that are usually just the juice is not worth the squeeze. There's going to be a few units on here that I think are just units that are either just very low impact and not really worth taking a lot of the time, or they're not doing enough for the resources that they require. The juice kind of isn't really worth the squeeze. But they're units that can win and can contribute. I just find myself not really taking them a lot, or them not really being that useful when I do take them. And finally, we have Pyreblooded tier. This is for units that are Pyreblooded. Okay, so without further ado, let's get into the tier list. We'll start with the Banished, as always, and alternate Monster Train 2 and Monster Train 1 clans, just to keep it a little more interesting. So first up is this Death's Dancer. And Divine Dancer is right after that too, so we may as well do them both at the same time. So Death's Dancer is our 1 Ember, 2 space unit with 714 stats that reads Shift apply 4 attack to friendly units. And then the Divine Dancer is the same thing, except it says armor 5 instead of 4 attack. These are kind of the rare shifter units. So I'm going to, maybe a bit unexpected, I am going to say that the +4 attack, this is the Death's Dancer one, is a bit weak, and the armor one is more situational. They both are situational in a way, right? I think that they both require Just Cause, generally speaking, to be good. But I just find, talking about the Death's Dancer first, I find that the +4 attack is not that meaningful. And the problem with it is that it is very frail. It is only 14 health, and it doesn't do anything to scale its own defense. So one of the things about shift is a lot of the time you're going to shift your unit to the front of the floor. So you might end up in a situation where your Death's Dancer is at the front of the floor with only 14 HP. Well, that's not very good. A lot of the time when you're doing shift strategies too, you're often doing something to accompany it, such as the Battle Dancer. It gains Valor 3, or Demonic Fledgling or something like that. And these guys gain Valor. So Valor 3, and then the other guy gains Rage, and it's like, this is just +4 attack, which compared to Valor 3 is really not even that much, and it doesn't even give the armor from the Valor 3 either. So I think this unit is just kind of underwhelming. It's like, okay, it definitely can work, but I find that it doesn't really scale that fast. Banished as a clan might kind of have a problem with like scaling offensively super fast, but unfortunately I don't think this really alleviates it. I just don't think that this is really that strong. 4 attack is really not that much. And then as for the Divine Dancer, I think it's a little bit better. I think that the armor 5 is more meaningful, and again, it doesn't run into that problem as often where you shift a unit to the front of the floor, her, and she just dies because she's in the front. Another thing too is that she also takes dualism. That armor 5 is actually affected by a dualism upgrade, whereas this 4 attack is not. So right off the bat, this one takes one more shop upgrade, the dualism, than this one does. Comfortably. Overall, I find them both to be kind of just okay, but the armor one is definitely better in my opinion. Okay, now next unit is the Hostguard. This is the 3 Ember 3 space unit with 2560 stat line with the ability Heavenly Slam, which is a cooldown 3, and it moves to any location on any floor and deals damage to the front enemy equal to this unit's health and armor. So what do we think about this unit? It's a very weird unit. It's hard to really evaluate at first, but I actually do think that this unit is breaking the rules. And I didn't think that at first, but I have just had enough experience with this unit now where it's one that I always feel like I never want to skip it, and every time I do take it, I end up being glad that I did. It's basically, it's a 3 Ember 3 space unit, but it's not really 3 space because you can move to any location on any floor, so you can overstack easily and just get him on the floor for free. And he has a 60 HP base health, which a lot of the time you just want to give him more health. Just give him plus 20 health, give him large stone, and he just makes for a really good free tank to just get onto your floor. A lot of the time you can even just use him to buy time. It's just, while you're getting your Valor going and your other things, you can just use him as a chump blocker every now and then. Just move him to the front when you need him to block a big hit, and you can move him back. Or you can just have him in the front of the floor to begin the battle, and then he eventually just dies because, well, he does have a lot of health. He doesn't have any way to heal himself or anything like that, so a lot of time he might just die, but often that's totally fine. He buys enough time for you to really get scaled up and to find your defensive answers. Or he's just another unit that you can just get onto the floor to just be any old, vessel for Valor. That if you have any kind of AoE Valor gain, like Everlasting Light, or the, let's go to that and show that actually. Yeah, Everlasting Light, this weapon, or you have some other kinds of like AoE, like Talos, AoE Valor gain. He's just another thing that could just, for free, accumulate stats on the floor. And yeah, I just pretty much always am happy to see this guy. He is 3 Ember, he is expensive, but the good news is you can just kind of play him whenever. You don't need to necessarily play him in deployment. And I haven't actually touched on the fact that his ability is kind of useful sometimes. Every 30 turns you can get, if you give him even plus 20 health and then another plus 20 health, it does 100 damage. It's just a nice little burst every couple turns. It's just a nice card. Like, that's the thing, and that's what you'll see here. I don't really think that this card is like, oh my god, Hostguard, I win. It's going to solo carry the run and be crazy. It's just nice. Always. It's just an always nice unit to have that's breaking the rules because it just gets another unit onto your floor that is a huge stat line that is cheating space out. So, this is our first breaking the rules unit. I've really come around to this being one of the stronger units that you can see. On to our first Monster Train 1 clan, the Apex Imp. Let's check out Apex Imp. 1 Ember, 2 Space, 10/10. He has Armored, so whenever he gains armor, he gains Rage equal to the amount of armor that he gains. And he gains 5 armor on Summon. This unit was absolutely insane in Monster Train 1. Many people thought it was the best unit in the game. I think you could definitely make an argument for that. One of the best, certainly. One of the top 3, I think, unquestionably. A lot of people had him as number 1. He just got super out of control, especially with that one-man show meta in Monster Train 1 that I talked about. Just get a couple of him on the floor, and you can infuse him too with like Steelworker, the uncommon unit that gives armor to everyone on the floor. Where is he? Him. Yeah, so you could infuse him with that, or you could just give him a bunch of armor from other stuff, and he would get to crazy, crazy attack numbers from all the rage he was getting, and he would just kind of solo carry the game very easily, even with very low armor. It really didn't take much armor to get this guy going. With all that background being said, I think he is just kind of merely strong now. And this is actually, I said I did have enough experience to speak to all these units. I think Apex Imp is maybe like the 1 or 2 units where I still don't feel totally comfortable because I still haven't really had a ton of experience with him. I've used him and he was like pretty good, but he's definitely a shadow of his former self. Especially because you can't infuse and Hellhorned is so much weaker now and their armor is just not really strong enough for this game. It doesn't really scale up to the level of Monster Train 2 threats that he feels a lot harder to kind of, I don't want to say a lot harder, but he feels less guaranteed to just kind of be something where you see him and you go, oh, I win. He needs a lot of more effort to make work now, I'd say. So I'm putting him as strong. I could see him maybe being situational. I don't know. Let me know what you think about this unit. I'm going to leave him in strong because I still think he does get pretty high attack values, but it's not like in the Monster Train 2 world with 500 HP tanks, I don't think the numbers that he gets to are like so insane now. He just scales well. And you're usually doing some kind of armor thing in Hellhorned, so you can usually get something out of him, and he scales pretty well without too much investment. But let me know. Maybe I'm overestimating him still. Maybe he's fallen more than I've thought. Okay, Consumer of Crowns. He's on this page. He is 8 Ember, 3 space, 100 attack, 40 HP, costs 1 less Ember per imp unit in your deck. So this guy is pretty much going to totally depend if you have Queen's Implings or not. And that's kind of where I put him. I put him in situational. He is much more playable. He used to cost 10 in Monster Train 1, but now at 8, especially with your 5 starting Queen's Implings, he's now 3 costs, and if you even add 1 more, he's only 2. And I'd say that's where he's really strong, in the early game especially. If you get 2 Ember, 100 attack, 40 health unit, that's really strong. It's just a really huge injection of stats in the early game. It'll carry you through most of the game. Now, he doesn't scale himself in any way, so that is a problem, but you're taking this guy more for the early game anyway. It's just that his only problem is that you basically do need Queen's Implings. You know, with Torch Starter, it's just not going to work the same way. Yeah, that's really all I have to say about him. He's a pretty straightforward unit. He's just a lot of stats. He'll definitely carry you if you can actually play him in the early game. In the early game, in my opinion, is more important than late game, just because the early game tends to be more kind of tumultuous. It's more in flux. You have less decision points that you could have made. There's more randomness. So just finding something like this just to stabilize your early game is really nice. It's just that half the time you can't play him. Now the Deranged Brute. Where are you? Previous page. Deranged Brute is a 1 Ember, 2 space, 10 attack, 25 HP, who says Rage on friendly units adds +3 attack per stack. So Rage normally gives 2 attack per stack. With this guy, it gives 5 attack per stack. So I'm going to say he's breaking the rules. I always loved this guy in Monster Train 1, and I still think he's really strong. He's just a very low investment set and forget, crazy scaling unit who is making your numbers go super high. He works very well as a tank. You can give him like Titanite and health. You can give him Smidge Stone to fit him on a floor. You can even just give him the rage. You can give him a +10 rage upgrade in the shop, and that gives 50 attack. I mean, it's like he's just like makes rage go super out of control, and it gets to a point where you really don't need much rage to get very strong. You'd be surprised at how high the numbers get quickly with this guy, with just not even that much rage. He really just kind of enables if you have any rage at all, your offensive scaling is totally solved for the whole run. He isn't super tanky, which is, he's only 1025, which is not a bad stat line, and he's also very cheap. He's 1 space, 2 Ember, which is sort of the normal unit stat line, or resource requirement, I should say. And he has pretty decent health, so he's very easy to make a tank, or just sit him on the floor as like a totem. But his payoff is so super high that he is basically always something I'm looking for, and I always take him pretty much when I have any kind of Hellhorned thing going on, any kind of rage. He just gets super out of control very quickly. Okay, that is it for Hellhorned. Next up is Pyreblooded. I'm sorry, the Pyreblooded tier, or your Pyreblooded clan. Getting ahead of myself. That is our next unit. I should say Pyreborn. There we go. Goldtooth. Where are you? Goldtooth is our first Pyreborn unit. 2 Ember, 2 space, 15 attack, 30 HP with Avarice 5, and plus 15 attack per 100 gold you started the turn with. So this guy is a very strong carry. He has Avarice 5, which means that he's making you money, and he can even gain attack during the fight. If you know that Avarice, or if you have any way to gain gold during a fight, his attack can go up in the middle of a fight by 15 for 100 gold threshold you cross. So he's a 1530 normally. Let's say you have 300 gold. He gains an extra 45 attack, so he's 6030. And he is giving you 5 gold each time he hits. So he really wants multi-strike. You know, he really functions as like a regular, typical carry. But especially at the end of a run, I'd say, once you start getting really crazy gold, which is not too hard with Pyreborn, especially when you have this unit, at 1,000 gold, he's gaining, what, 150 attack? So he has 165 total. And if you give him multi-strike, or even 2 multi-strike, you know, he's dishing out a ton of damage. He's also gaining you a ton of gold. So a very multifaceted unit. I am just going to put him in strong. I actually don't quite think he's breaking the rules of the game because he's just a very strong carry, and he's not super strong in the early game. He does take a little bit of time to get offline, but I really like him. He's just a guy that can really do a couple of things for you. You know, I did kind of say he does want to be a carry, but actually with the 30 starting base HP, that is quite high. You can make him a tank, and I've done that before with like a Titanite and a Large Stone or something like that, and he's just that's a very high amount of HP to start with, especially in Pyreborn, which is a clan that doesn't have much defense. It's very nice to have that initial boost. And you just use him as a tank, and he just gains a little bit of gold for you every now and then. So, I mean, he is really nice to have. And it's, you know, I'm kind of like thought about putting him here, but I think there is enough times where I feel like I don't really want to take him. He doesn't really feel like he has any place in a run sometimes when you see him. Just sometimes it just feels like I don't really need this guy. Or he's just worse than whatever else Pyreborn is offering me. You know, they also have Hothead and Greed Dragon and other stuff. So a lot of the time, well, I wouldn't say a lot of the time, I'd say sometimes, you know, I don't actually end up taking him. I don't think he's so strong that I can like pivot off of what I'm doing to like take him or anything like that, but he is just very good. He's just, yeah, has pretty high stats for a carry and can get very strong later on and could even be used as a tank and just gives you money while being a strong unit. It is harder to play 2 of them because he's 2 Ember, but that's a small price to pay. Yeah, very strong, and I really like him. He's actually one of my favorite units in the game. I just really like his design, but not quite in the highest tier for me. I think it is because he does take quite a while to come online. Like in like the super late game, he gets very strong, but actually you kind of want to be spending your money for most of your run, which is hurting his attack. So he doesn't get like super high levels of attack early, but even just holding like 300 gold, like I said, gets into like 60, which is very respectable. You don't need to hold on to that much gold in order to just get him to like a decent-ish carry. So, very strong. Not breaking the rules in my opinion, but pretty close to it. Next up, we have the man himself. Everyone's favorite Pyreblooded. This is 2 Ember, 1 space, 5 attack, 10 HP, with the ability Empower, which is a 3 cooldown. Gain attack equal to Pyrogel stacks on all units. And it is important to note, on all units means all units on the floor. I don't know why, for some reason, that isn't super clear to me, or wasn't when I first played this unit. But keep in mind, it's only to units on the floor. So we can just do the honors right here, put him where he belongs. The problem with this unit is several. So going back to him, he costs 2 Ember, so that makes it more difficult to get multiple out. You know, he does only take 1 space, but that's kind of... Unfortunately, the benefit of 1 space is kind of nullified by him costing 2 Ember. Not nullified, but it's much harder to play multiple of them. He has very poor base stats, 510. So a lot of the time you do need to get him some kind of HP, being that this clan doesn't have any defense, so to speak of. And then he probably wants multi-strike too, right? I mean, that's probably what he wants. He either wants 2 multi-strike or he wants a health and a multi-strike. So he's pretty picky with what he wants. But the biggest problem comes with this ability, Empower. It is 3 cooldown, and he only gains attack equal to Pyrogel stacks on the units on the floor. I don't really know how much Pyrogel this game thinks that I'm putting on enemies. But if I have enough Pyrogel to get this guy to, let's say, 100 attack, I feel like I have enough Pyrogel to win with anything. Even just to get him to like 100 attack, it's like, that is still not even that good. It's on 3 cooldown, and it just feels super redundant. And you've heard me say this too if you've watched some of my other videos. I think that the only really super reliable Pyrogel engine in this game is Magma Cultist, which is another 2 Ember unit, which is very hard to play all of these. You usually want to play 2 Magma Cultists by the time that you're ending your run, at least 2. And then to also get a Pyreblooded under the floor, it just feels like, what's the point of that at that point? If I'm already inflicting so much Pyrogel, then I can just do anything. I don't need to waste it on this guy. And if I'm not doing that much Pyrogel, then this guy gains just a pitiful amount of attack. I mean, it's just really nothing. It is just such a hilariously undertuned unit. It's really hard for me to describe why it's so bad if you've never used it. But I feel like everyone who's used this unit would back me up in saying how bad it is. It is just so undertuned. It's just so low power. It just does nothing. And if it ever does do something, it means you're going to win anyway. I'd really like to see them change this guy. Yeah. Pretty sad. Next up, Zealot. Here is our clan's only sweeper. He is 3 Ember, 2 space, with a 1020 stat line. He says sweep, and he says action. Apply Pyrogel 5 to enemy units. Now keep in mind, that says action, which means it's only on his turn, so to speak. So if you give him multi-strike, he doesn't do it twice. He only does it once per his action. So every round of Relentless or every round of combat and non-relentless, even no matter how much strike he has, he only does it once. So he is an interesting unit. The Pyrogel 5 feels very low value to some extent. He's a weird one. He's just a sweeper. He has pretty good stats, 1020. That's pretty good for a sweeper, but the 3 Ember cost is kind of hard to stomach. But a lot of the time, I'm willing to pay whatever cost for a unit that says sweep on it. That's totally fine. Especially in a clan that has a bunch of Pyrogel already. If you have a good amount of Pyrogel application, you can really, really kill things with this guy pretty easily. I think that the Pyrogel action is supposed to be a way for him to have more power against like killing bosses in the early game, especially. Like, it makes his Relentless stronger. Other than that, I don't really think the Pyrogel aspect of him is really that strong. I think it's just a matter of he says sweep on him, which is good. Yeah, he's a cool unit. I mean, he's very expensive and he says sweep, but that's good. So I'm just going to put him in strong. I mean, he's just a good sweeper. He's one of the best sweepers in the game. He definitely does a lot more than a lot of the other sweepers do, but he's not doing anything like crazy. He just says sweep. He costs 3 Ember, which, again, is a lot, but a lot of the time, for sweep, I'm willing to pay 3 Ember. Next up, we are moving on to Awoken. Our first unit is Steel Singer. 3 Ember, 4 space. Summon, gain 80 max health. So he doesn't gain that filled up. So he has... So let's do this first. Rejuvenate, +1 attack permanently, and he has 20 attack, 40 HP. So with his summon effect, gain 80 max health, he doesn't gain that filled. He still summons in as a 2040. you have to heal him up to 80, or 80 more to get him up to 120. And then every time you do heal him, he gains 1 attack permanently. This unit is also going in the Pyreblooded tier. I fooled you into thinking that would only have Pyreblooded in it. No, it has Steel Singer also. This unit is also extremely bad. For sort of similar reasons in that it's just a very pitiful scaling. It's just so low. The amount of actual attack that you ever can get out of this is so minimal. And the problem is you need to invest everything into him. You need to like be constantly healing him and spending your entire turn healing, pouring all the healing you got into him. All your Ember goes to healing him. And he just gains not that much attack. He was very good in Monster Train 1 because of that one-man show meta where you would get him up, you'd buff him up to 120-ish attack throughout a run, and then you'd dupe him once, maybe even twice. And you just stick one of each on every floor. And, you know, you'd have him with multi-strike and something else, and that was good enough, and that would win very often. These days, that's not cutting it. The amount of attack he gets is just not nearly enough to get through the game. He takes up way too much space. He costs way too much Ember. He's a very low value unit. I actually do have a run on this channel where I kind of got like the dream scenario with him, which is to get Smidgestone and Titanite, and he just exists as a one space 120 max HP tank with Titanite, so effectively 240 HP. He didn't really gain that much attack throughout the run, even with me healing him, and he still costs 3 Ember, even with that. That's like the ideal scenario, is you have like a big tank that still costs 3 Ember, in a clan that honestly is not really hurting for tanks. Yeah, he's just very low value. He's very underwhelming. I'd like to see him buffed as well in some way. He's just way too much investment for basically no payoff. Okay, and next we have Vine Mother. This is 1 Ember, 2 space, 0 attack, 35 HP, resolve. Add a sting spell to your hand. And then Sting deals 12 damage to the front unit and draws 1 more card next turn. You should know that. I'm putting her in a bit weak. I think it's sort of the same thing as Steel Singer when I said that it can function as a tank. In a clan that's not really hurting for tanks. The reason why Vine Mother is so much better is because she is 1 Ember and 2 space as opposed to 3 Ember and 4 space. The sting that you get is like, okay, it's basically, you basically draw 1 extra card per turn on your first rotation, and then like 1 more after that. I don't know, it's weird. It's basically a way to like, it helps your card draw a good amount, and I think that I've kind of had a thesis for a little bit now growing as an overall, like, this is a bit of an aside, as like an overall opinion that I've started to develop about Monster Train 2, is that like drawing cards is a lot more powerful than you realize. Even just drawing 1 next turn, so I might not be giving this unit quite enough credit. But I still think it's just kind of like not really that great. It's just a fine-ish tank that's like, yeah, it's doing something, but I feel like their other tanks are just better. This is just not a super valuable unit. It's pretty low investment, so it's hard to get mad at it, but it's so rare that I ever want to use this. I have used it. Give it plus 20 HP and Titanite. It's a good tank. And I think that its effect, again, is probably better than I'm giving it credit for, or anyone's really giving it credit for. But it's still not anything amazing. And there's just better tanks. So I did put her in a bit weak. And speaking of better tanks, we have Wilting Sapwood. 2 Ember, 3 space, 550 stat line. Revenge, gain an Ember. This guy had a huge glow up from Monster Train 1. I don't remember exactly what his stat line was, but he had something like 20 to 30 HP in Monster Train 1. Now he has 50, which is really nice. Another thing is with the deployment phase, It's way easier to justify adding this guy to your deck. You know, now that your priority unit draw is not necessarily eaten up by him like it was in Monster Train 1, and you don't get your carry unit, this guy you can just get out in deployment, and he just passively provides a ton of value. Tons of Ember. He's basically like a unit version of a Boiler Room. You give him Endless, or you just give him Titanite and health. He can be your tank, or he can just sit on a floor by himself. He's just a very strong unit that's giving you tons and tons of Ember. This was one of the single worst units in the entire game, and now I think it's one of the best. I think this is one of the units that's really breaking the rules. It's just giving you tons of Ember. I mean, once you get to those late game waves, you're getting hit 5 or even 6 times. I mean, this guy is just giving you 5 or 6 Ember a turn, especially if you can find Endless for him. It's really crazy. And you don't even really care about the 2 Ember cost on him on Endless, because you gained 5 or 6 from having him on the on the floor last turn. So that's very easy to stomach. He's just always doing something. Just super high floor and an crazy, crazy ceiling, just giving you tons of Ember, letting you do so many broken things, you know, especially with Awoken, who has cards such as Awoken's Rail Spike. Draw a ton of cards with all that Ember. That's one really good use for it. Or just anything, really. I mean, I don't think it's really a big secret that having a lot of Ember is extremely good. He's a very low investment. You just give him Endless. And even aside from that, you don't find Endless. He's still very usable with Titanite or, you know, a smidge and just health or something like that. You just heal him to keep him alive every now and then. He's just always doing something for you. Really, really, really strong unit. Okay, now we have Luna. And the first Luna unit is Ethereal Sealy. 1 Ember, 1 space, 5/5, with Conduit 5, and apply +1 stack of Conduit each time it is applied. So this is a really great unit that gives you a ton of Conduit, particularly in 2 major situations. The first one is the Conduit Eka, and the second is the Moon Rituals. So that's whether you're starting with Moon Rituals or you have a Lunar Priestess. I'll show you that one in case you don't remember which one that is. Lunar Priestess is the 8/8 that gives a Moon Ritual with Ephemeral to your hand every turn. So that's a really big payoff, but you know, any source of Conduit gaining +1 each time it is applied is good. If you're doing any kind of Conduit thing, it's pretty decently easy to get on the floor, but it does only have 5 HP, which means that it does die to Gravity. Where's Gravity? That is the Ascend card. Where are you? Oh, I'm in units, that's why. There you are. Gravity, you can send something on the floor or descend. Does 5 damage though, so she does just barely die to it, which does mean you want to give her some HP, but really you want to give her HP anyway. I mean, she doesn't really need a whole lot of upgrades. Basically all she needs is an extra Conduit and +20 from the shop, and that's good enough. She's just sort of like a totem that adds a ton of extra Conduit to the floor. Really weaponizes, or really kind of like gets that Conduit scaling super high. Which is really so much of the engine of what Luna is as a clan. So this is just kind of multiplying that effect. I'm going to put her in situational though, because again, like I said, well, 2 things really is that she's really better with the Moon Rituals than she is with like Witch Weaves. She really wants like maybe like the Conduit Eka or a Lunar Priestess. And maybe on Luna, sometimes you aren't doing Conduit stuff, you know, sometimes you aren't just doing like New Moon type of thing, like Shade Guards or something like that. And she's not always useful, but And the other problem is that a lot of time with Luna, especially a lot of Luna units have this problem. Oftentimes they just want so much crap on the floor. They just have so many little things they want to jam onto their floors that it's just hard to piece these things together. So sometimes she just doesn't fit. Sometimes you just can't really justify adding her because you just can't really make room for her. So it is a bit harder to kind of get her to work, and she is maybe a little bit pickier with starter cards and stuff like that, but it is still very strong effect if you can make use of it. Okay, and now we have Moonguard. This guy's really cool. 2 Ember, 2 Space, 30-30 with Mageblade 3, and he has another Mageblade 3 during New Moon, so he's total of Mageblade 6 during New Moon. Which basically means that he gets extra 6 attack for each stack of magic power on the floor. That's what Mageblade is. This is a guy who can, if you're doing any kind of conduit thing, any kind of conduit scaling, this guy can get pretty crazy high attack without too much effort. He is definitely a carry unit, but again, the 30 HP is really valuable for him. It's a really nice amount of HP to start with, especially in a clan that really struggles with HP. So many units in Luna just have super low base HP, so him having 30 is really nice. And then he just gets really, really high. You know, you have to see it in action, but he gets really, really high attack a lot of the time if you're doing any kind of conduit strategy where you're gaining constant conduit. You know, during New Moon, especially if you have phase control, if you can keep it New Moon, then he could just get, so Mageblade 6. If you have 50 conduit on the floor, he gets 300 attack from that. And, you know, with like a dualism Moon Pixie and like a planetarium, so let me show you those real quick. Like Moon Pixie, the one that enchants all your units with conduit, you get dualism on it, and you get like planetarium. You know, everything gets conduit, you get a really wide floor together. Then his attack can get pretty out of control pretty quickly. So yeah, I mean, he does cost 2 Ember, so it's harder to play multiple of them. And he has 2 Space, so again, like I said, a lot of the time Luna wants to jam these floors together, and he is pretty multi-strike reliant. I'm going to put him in Strong. Again, even though his numbers can get really super high, he's not solving like a ton. He's not like super universal. Sometimes you just aren't doing conduit stuff. Sometimes it's just hard to really get him on the floor or to support him. He's not like universally always takeable. I wish he was. He's a very fun and cool unit, but he's just merely very strong. I mean, definitely every conduit build appreciates having something like this as a finisher. Just something that can do a huge amount of damage without a ton of investment. But then again, Luna's kind of a clan that oftentimes gets really, really strong in the late game anyway, no matter what you're doing, but this is certainly one of the ways to do that. And lastly on Luna, we have the Scrivener, 2 Ember with 1 Space, 15 attack, 8 HP with ability Spell Weave, 2 cooldown, draw a spell and apply -1 Ember. That -1 Ember that applies does persist through the whole fight, which is pretty nice. The thing that's not nice is that both of the starter cards in Luna, Witch Weave, and Moon Ritual cost 0. And you have 5 of each of those in your deck, and a lot of the time you're going to be drawing those, and they don't get cost reduced. But even so, it's still drawing them from your deck, which, you know, like I said earlier about drawing cards, it's maybe a little bit stronger than we give it credit for. Even still, though, I don't really think that this card is that good. I'm going to put it in a bit weak. It's just, again, the Luna problem where it's just so hard to justify putting this on the floor. Its effect is not very good. It's 2 Ember. It has poor stats. You want to get so many other things on your floors often when you're doing any kind of spell casting stuff. It's just so hard to justify having her around. She can often be just like okay as a thing to add, and you don't need to play her on your main floor, which is a nice thing about her. You can have your main floor be middle, and you can just play your top behind like a shield steward or something, and just use your ability every 2 turns, and it's like pretty decently nice. But I don't think it's like that good to where it's like really worth being any higher. It's just fine, but it's often so hard to really justify adding this to your deck. It's just not necessary, and it's pretty low ceiling. It's also pretty random. I have no idea what I'm gonna get. It's so hard to plan around it. Kind of fun, but not very powerful to me. Now we're into Stygian. Eel Gorgon was the one that was up. This is the 2 Ember, 2 Space, 10/5 unit that has incant whenever you cast a spell, gain multi-strike 1. And resolve at the end of the turn, remove all status effects. So this is a very interesting one. This guy was one of the kings in Monster Train 1. Right up there with Apex Imp, one of the strongest units in the game. So every turn he gains multi-strike for every spell you cast, but then he loses all that multi-strike. He also loses everything, any yellow buff that you can give him, like Quick, Trample. He loses all that. He also loses negative effects, such as Corruption, Sap. He also loses positive effects, like Valor, Rage. So the only way to buff this guy is through stats, through raw stats alone. He loses armor, too. So it's just stats. Flat attack, flat health. Then you can cast some spells, and you give him a bunch of multi-strike. That was amazing in Monster Train 1 for that one-man show meta. In this game, I don't know. I want to say he's sort of more situational. He maybe is even in a bit weak. So there's a few problems with this unit now, I'd say. The one is that you need to actually get this guy scaled a lot more in this game in terms of his stats to really survive, for 1, and 2, to actually chew through the waves. You just need much higher stats than you did before. And Stygian has no way to buff stats inherently. There's not too many ways to really buff his stats. I'd say like Umbra's good at it. Maybe Awoken in some ways, through like hollows or something, a razor sharp edge or steel enhancer. Maybe like a melting with like a whiplash can buff his attack, or like reforms, but that's kind of weird and hard to do. There's like pretty minimal ways to actually buff his stats, and you do need to buff both of his stats. Like you do need to keep him alive, and you do need to also get his attack going. He does lose any effect from equipments, so equipments don't really help him, other than the 2 big ones. The 2 combo pieces for this guy are one of either Glass Cannon or Stoic Plate Mail. So with Glass Cannon, you give him that one. That is 1 Ember 50 attack weapon that gives Fragile. He loses that Fragile at the end of the turn. Just be careful in your first turn you play it, because he still has the Fragile on the first turn you get it. And the second one is, the other one I said was, what, Stoic Plate Mail? This gives 30 HP and armor 60, so that's a lot of defensive stats. And it silences him. So basically what you want to do is you want to incant as much as possible, and then you want to stick this on him to silence him, to remove that remove all status effects thing from him. So he basically stays at whatever multi-strike you had him at. Let's say you incant 7 times, he gets 7 multi-strike, and then he has all these stats forever. He doesn't lose that multi-strike anymore. Now on the downside, he doesn't gain any more multi-strike either. And of course, Bloodthirsty Blade is another good one, as it usually is, but where are we? Yeah, I find him much more difficult to kind of get going in this game. And it's another thing about incant, is that incant in this game kind of requires your utmost attention. It only works on the floor you're playing on, and you kind of need to incant as much as possible, which means that you're only really tending to his floor. You kind of have to ignore all your other floors, which makes this harder to stomach. He definitely had a big fall from grace. I have made him work. I think Umbra, like I said, was the most recent run I had with him pretty recently. He's good with like morsels and stuff. But I don't know. He's definitely good if you can get all those buffs on him. So I'll just leave him in situational, but I can see an argument for a bit weak. And now what's this one? Lodestone Totem is the next one. 3 Amber, 1 space, 0/1. Incant apply sap 1. So same thing, we have the incant problem here. He also costs 3 Ember, so it's pretty hard to play more than one of these, even though you often want to do that. You know, if you get 6 incants, that's sap 6. You take him dualism, that's sap 12, which is 24 attack, which is, you know, I guess that's like I guess that's probably good enough. If you can get like 6-ish incants, it's just maybe average, I would say, maybe, something like that. But he needs dualism, or you need 2 of them for that to work. And then he's not actually like doing anything to kill bosses. So you still need to have something else going on. It's particularly the Titans is where he kind of falls apart. I think he's still pretty, I don't know, I'm saying he. It's kind of like I don't think this is like a he or anything like that, but it's just a totem. But it just doesn't do anything on Titans, I think, is kind of the main problem. I don't know, I said it for Apex Imp, and this is, I think, kind of maybe the other unit where I don't feel super comfortable with where I'd put this one. I have used it, and it did work, but it was really rough and really hard to make work. I'm going to say it's a bit weak. But I could see it being more situational. It's often just so hard to really justify this thing. It's very expensive, and it's not like super strong. It does kind of probably need dualism, and you also need to be doing other stuff, which is much harder when it already costs 3 Ember, and you also need to be incanting everything on that floor. So, I don't know. And then finally we have the Offering Monument, which is 1 Ember, 1 space, 0/40, incant, lose 5 health, and draw a card. So I talked about how good drawing cards is, especially when you can draw a whole bunch of them in one turn immediately. Yeah, I mean, this is basically equivalent to 8 draws. Really, you can give them plus 20 health, and that's another 4, and then another plus 20 is another 4, so it's 16 draws. You can even give them large stone, maybe. I feel like I wouldn't do that, because the 1 space is kind of important, but you give him 2 plus 20s, and he draws 16 cards on every incant that you do. You know, I did kind of talk badly about incant earlier, but if you're doing any kind of incant strategy, you know, drawing 16 cards very quickly can be extremely strong. You know, it's basically drawing through almost your whole deck, like, very quickly. You're finding all of your critical cards, you're getting through that first cycle of your deck, which is very important, and getting all the critical cards out of there. It does a lot of the time need Ember, but, you know, if you add a bunch of zero-cost spells, which when you're doing incant, you often want to do that, you're often finding the key cards very quickly, and then this guy just kind of eventually goes away. He eventually just dies and kills himself. You know, you can't heal him because he loses that 5 health permanently. It's not like he takes 5 damage, he loses 5 health. So you can't heal it. If you have some way to buff its health, like a Steel Enhancer or something, then you can get more draws out of it that way. But yeah, I mean, even just getting like 16 draws out of this and it goes away forever, just to like stabilize your early game or early rounds of combat, is extremely strong. I am putting him in Breaking the Rules. It's a really, really strong unit. Just drawing through your whole deck really fast is probably stronger than you're giving it credit for. Finding, like I said, finding all of your critical cards, you know, maybe weapons you couldn't give deployable, or specific units that are not banner units that you kind of need to put on your floor to make work, like Moon Pixie or something like I mentioned earlier. finding all those critical cards, the rooms and whatever, or the stuns for just that first round of combat to make sure your unit doesn't die on the first turn and stuff like that. It's really, really, really powerful. And it also just gets the ball rolling on incant with sirens. That's kind of the big incant thing, right? Is the sirens, to the Siren of the Sea and the Nameless Siren. If you have 2 of those on your floor, you just get tons and tons of stats very quickly. It just gets the ball rolling on these, so that you get a huge initial injection of stats to start off with. They are a bit weak to begin with, but you can get them out of the gate pretty quickly with that Offering Monument. Really strong unit. If I'm doing any kind of incant thing, I always want to see this. Even if I don't have an incant strategy together yet, I will oftentimes just take this, because I'm going to be casting spells, and I'm going to be drawing cards, so that's amazing. Now it is time for Underlegion, and our first unit is everybody's favorite Balmabello. Oh, Balmabello. Where are you? 3 Ember, 2 Space, 1550. With Regen 6 and Spike 6 and Extinguish, apply this unit's buff stacks to friendly units. This is a very weird unit. It's a very popular one, has a bit of a fan club online I've seen. It's cool. I want to say it's good. I feel like unfortunately I can't though. Every time I see a screenshot of this unit of somebody saying it's so crazy and broken, it's like, it basically just has like tons of reanimate and spikes and everything, and I'm just like, okay, is that Balmabello is broken, or is that Lazarus is broken? Because every time it's always a bunch of reanimate. Like, I feel like this unit works really well with a ton of reanimate and Lazarus stuff, but otherwise it's just so weird. This is a very weird unit. I have no idea what I want to do with this every time I see it. Every time I see it in a banner, I always stare at it for a couple minutes, just trying to think of what I could do with it, and I usually come up with nothing. I've tried this unit plenty of times when I first started playing this game, and I've just really never gotten it to do anything meaningful. It's a good unit early game. That Spike 6 will clear out backliners, and it's really a really strong tank. I mean, 50 HP is quite a lot in the early game, especially with that regen. If you can give it a loam coat, then it's going to solo most of the game up until about Kale. So we'll go to loam coat, just in case you aren't aware. Oh, it's a common. This one gives an extra 20 HP, and it propagates itself, so it increases those spikes in regen and any other buffs you give it. It'll solo the game up until about Kale, in which case it will fall off so insanely hard and just do nothing. Obviously the idea with this unit is you want to propagate it, right? You want to stack buffs on it. It already has regen and spikes, but then you want to stack other buffs on it, and you want to use all your propagate that just increase those buff stacks. But then it's weird. It's like you want to get it to die to add all of the stacks to units on the floor, but if it has a ton of regen, when you've propagated it a bunch, it doesn't really die that easily. And if it does die easily, it's usually dying pretty quickly, and it's not really giving that many stats. And it's giving spikes to all of your units, so it's giving it to your backliners and stuff, which don't need spikes. And there's so many confusing things about this unit. I don't know. I just look at it and I'm just like, huh. I just don't know what the ideal situation with this is supposed to be, other than just reanimating it. That's the only thing I can really think of that it really works well with. It's so hard to understand what this is supposed to really be doing. I can never really find a way to make this work. I really want to, because it seems like a very fun unit in theory, but I can just never really get this. I can never find a place for this unit. So I guess I have to rank it. I'm going to put it in a bit weak. It's a decent enough tank in the early game, but it falls off very sharply. And ultimately it just becomes useless. Next up is the Deathcap Prophet. 1 Ember, 1 Space, 3/8 stats with Rally. Draw +1 next turn. We all know how I feel about draw. If you're doing any kind of rally strategy, this is just going to give you to 10 cards a turn. You're just going to get the max draw every single turn. And Underlegion is a clan that typically wants to go some combination of Ember and Space, maybe a good 2/3 of the time in terms of their boss relics. They want to get Ember and Space very often. A lot of the time on them I'll go Ember and Space, or I'll go double Ember. I will not go the draw relic as often as other clans, so getting this draw is even better in that instance. So if you're doing any kind of rally strategy and you just get this guy on the floor, you're just going to get the max draws every single turn. And even if you're not doing any kind of rally strategy, if you have like Erratic Assistance or Queen's Implings or something, you can just kind of play this on its own floor and just summon whatever you got in front of it, stewards, imps, and whatever, and just get a few draws out of it. 5 to 8 draws, something like that, and it's kind of like a mini offering monument. You do get some draws out of it. It cycles through your deck really fast, and that's like the worst case scenario. When you have Underlegion, you are often doing some kind of draw, so this is drawing so many cards that it's also going to be in breaking the rules. It's just getting you to like 10 draws every single turn, very consistently. The only situation really in which this isn't that good is when you have Pyre of Entropy. That's the only situation in which this is just not a useful card at all. So that is like its one downside, but that's 1 Pyre out of however many Pyres there are. What is there, 14, 16 Pyres? Something like that, I don't know off the top of my head, but that's the only scenario in which this is not a super strong unit that's just giving you tons of draw for very little cost. 1 Space, 1 Ember. Now we have Enchantrell. Enchantrell, 3 Ember, 2 Space, 8/8 stats with Rally, applies sap 1 enemy units. So same thing as you need to kind of be doing some kind of rally. And I do think you need to be actually doing the rally, because it doesn't have the benefit of Deathcap Prophet where you can just kind of play it on its own floor somewhere else away from your main stuff and then like play whatever units you have out. Because sapping stuff is something you actually need to be on the main floor to be doing. So this does want to be on your actual floor. It is also 2 Space and 3 Amber, so way higher investment. With that being said, though, again, if you have any kind of rally thing going on, a lot of the time this is just sapping units into nothing. Especially with dualism, this is a really, really good defensive unit, really good defensive game plan. If you have the Ember and the Space for it, which again, like I said, with Underlegion, a lot of time you do want to go Ember and Space. So if you have some way to justify adding this or getting it on the floor with a rally strategy, it's very strong. I don't think it's like super crazy, out of this world strong, and you do need to actually be doing a rally strategy, which is not guaranteed. So I am going to put this in maybe situational, I think. I think there's an argument to be made for strong. Yeah, it's another one that's kind of hard to say. It's like right on the border. I will say situational, though. Like, you're not always doing rally. And again, unlike Deathcap Prophet, you can't just like play whatever units you have and get a good effect out of it. It does need to be on your floor, and it's also way higher investment. So situational, I guess. Umbra next. Which way are you? Morsel Maid is our first guy. 2 Ember, 2 Space, 520. Hunger, feed on units with Eaten. So basically, what he does is, whenever you play a morsel, or whenever a morsel is put onto the floor, he eats it immediately. He gains its stats, and then he also has the Gorge +2/+2. So every morsel he eats will also give him an additional 2 attack and 2 health. So, doing any kind of Gorge morsel stuff, he scales pretty fast. In Monster Train 1, a lot of people really love this unit. It was one of the best units for a lot of people. This is the first one that, unlike Apex Imp and Ilgorgon, for me, I don't think that this was ever that strong. I think this still did have the problem of really needing multi-strike, really needing trample or something like that, which, again, in Umbra, you do kind of see that stuff often, but it's not a guarantee. Still, though, he makes a very nice one big hit unit. His problem is that even though morsels are buffed, I still think this 2-2 is maybe for Monster Train 2 not quite enough. I think his scaling is a little bit slow in this game. He's still just as multi-strike reliant, and the stats that he gains are just not that much. You also can only play one of him, so he's like kind of capped on how much you can really abuse him. And it's not like you can play him one on each floor, because you can still only feed him with each morsel once, so he really is only kind of a one-time thing. You just have to play him, and all your morsels have to go into him. One of the big problems with Umbra units in general is that you kind of need to be... is that so many of them are like Gorge units. So many of them are competing for your morsels. And I do think that morsels are much better in this game. But then it kind of shines light on the problem of everything is a Gorge unit, it feels like. You have so many things competing for Gorge that it's hard a lot of the time to justify adding this guy. I still think he's a good carry, and he's one of the better carries in Umbra. I'm going to call him situational. But his scaling is just a little bit slow, and he is competing for a lot of morsel stuff. Also, when you have Plinks, any kind of Gorge strategy is way harder. But he can be very good. He can be very good. Give him a large stone and a multi-strike or something. Get him some morsels. He does scale. He's nice to have as like a one big hit thing. It's pretty nice. But he's just competing, and scaling is a little slow. Overgorger. This is 2 Ember, 3 Space, 0-25 Gorge, plus 2 attack permanently. Another unit that once again is competing for Gorge. It is also 2 Ember, like Morsel made, and it's also 3 Space, so it's even more space. Its stats are pretty low. 25 health isn't terrible, but 0 attack is nothing to begin with. It also is, again, very multi-strike or trample reliant. 2 attack permanently is also, again, just not that much. It's really just not scaling that crazily. Maybe it's getting like 100-ish to 150 during any given run. I think that's generally where it's been, like the 1 or 2 times I've taken it. But it's not really ever getting super out of control, and it's a lot of effort. It's not like super high payoff. It's pretty low stats. It's high investment, high resource intensive, competing with morsel stuff. He's competing with all the other Gorge units. He's pretty close to being in Pyreblooded tier, but I am just going to put him in a bit weak. It's a pretty bad unit, I think, but it does work. It's so often it's like, why would I ever want to use this? Pretty much every other Gorge unit in the game I feel like has some other payoff other than just gain stats. Morsels kind of give you stats anyway, which is kind of maybe some of what my issue with Morsel Mate is that in this game maybe I would rather just have those extra effects from the Gorges rather than just more stats. And the big problem with these stats is that a lot of these stats just aren't enough. +2/+2 and then +2 attack permanently. It's not that much. It's not enough, I think. I think they just need to buff this number that it gives you. It's just not quite enough, I think. Finally, we have Shadow Siege. Our favorite 6 Ember, 6 Space construct. No text. 200 attack, 150 HP. He's a weird one. He was completely unplayable in Monster Train 1 unless you started with Sketches of Salvation, which they have now changed in Monster Train 2, so it really doesn't work. But with the deployment phase, he's actually playable if you have the space for him and if you take an Ember. Or if you give him Smidge Stone, which is the main thing, right? You really want to give him Smidge Stone. That's kind of the main thing. And that makes him just 6 Ember, which, with a lot of Ember Drain stuff, such as, one of the best cards in the game. Where is it? Perils of Production. That's your way out of Ember Drain. Or it's your way to gain a ton of Ember even. Just get a Holdover and Spell Chain on one of those. You can suddenly play him. If you can't play him in deployment, a lot of the time you don't really want to play him in deployment because it's just a huge ask. Even if you do take one deployment Ember, he's taking up your entire deployment just to play him. Which, I don't know, for how much stats he is, especially in the early game, a lot of time it is worth it, but I think the main thing with this guy is just let him be in your deck and just play him when you get him with your Holdover, Perils, or whatever, and he's just a huge ball of stats. You're 200, 150, really nothing to sneeze at. You give him Titanite or Multi-Strike or something like that, as well as that Smidge Stone, and he's just a ton of stats up front. He makes for a really solid carry or a really solid tank if you can play him. So I'll actually put him in situational. I think he's much more playable now. It's very much an if you can play him, but a lot of times, especially if you find Perils, he is very playable. You just need to get a Smidge Stone. Or if you are going some kind of space, then you maybe can get him on the floor, but at that point, if I weren't to find a Smidge Stone, I probably wouldn't try to make him work. Still, a very usable unit now. Just a ton of upfront stats if you can play him. Now for our Lazarus units. Get off of Umbra. Where are you? Hydra Armed Horror is our first one. 2 Ember, 2 Space, 15, 15. Equipped. The equipment is removed, gain multi-strike 1. So this guy's kind of like the Eel Gorgon, where you can give him a ton of multi-strike. The difference is that he keeps the multi-strike. He also keeps any buffs you give him. The downside to him is that he can't get any weapon effects. He immediately throws away the weapon effect. He just replaces it with multi-strike. This is a weird one. I feel like this is a unit that sounds a lot better than it actually is. Especially, I find, you feel like you have erratic assistance. I feel like you can get baited into taking this guy and thinking that he'll be good because you give him 5 multi-strike. He attacks 6 times total with 5 erratic assistant weapons. And then any other weapons you get, and we'll also give him another multi-strike. But here's the thing, is that 15 6 times is just still not that much damage. It's, what, 90 damage? It's just not that much still. You still really need to find a way to buff this guy. Again, he has the same problem as Ilgorgon. He does get to keep any buffs, which is true, but Lazarus is a clan that doesn't really have that many buffs outside of, like, mixes. But you don't have mixes if you have erratic assistance. So it's a weird situation where I feel like this unit is probably actually better with mixes than he is with erratic assistance. And then you just give him a couple of equipments. And then he's sort of like kind of a bad Animus of Will that's asking you to do a lot. It's one of those units that's pretty perfectly fitting for the category where I said how he's just kind of asking too much of you a lot of the time. And it's just not that good. Like, his stats are pretty poor. He's 2 Ember. He's discarding all the weapon effects, so he doesn't really get any, like something like a Twisted Back. Yeah, Twisted Back is the trample one with the rage. That would be a great weapon for him. Unfortunately, he throws it out when you give it to him, so he can't gain that rage. Yeah, it's just a... And also, when you have Baron Grail, a lot of the time, you have assistance means you have Baron Grail. You have to equip him with the weapon. He would be great with Living Armory Grail, but the problem is that Living Armory Grail also has the equipped effect. So you need to equip the Living Armory Grail to buff this guy's attack, but then that means he doesn't get the multi-strike. So it's like very at odds with that. I don't know, I really don't like this unit. Every time I've tried it, I've just been very underwhelmed. I feel it's too weak. It's just not... It's too hard to buff it, I find. It really needs a lot of buffs, even with the multi-strike. Both of the Eel Gorgon in this unit are just kind of demonstrating the effect in Monster Train 2 of having a ton of multi-strike is less important than it was in Monster Train 1, and having a lot of stats is more important than it was. This unit would have been probably really good in Monster Train 1 if they had equipment in Monster Train 1, but in this game, it's just too weak. It doesn't have enough stats, and it's too hard to get its stats up. Okay, 9 Life Nightmares next. 2 Ember, 1 Space, 1/1 with Reanimate 8. Pretty simple. The ideal buffs is you give him Dualism, which gets him to Reanimate 16, and you can also give him another Reanimate, maybe. So that'll give him up to 18. So this is an interesting one. There's a lot of different things you can do with this unit. You can give him... let me just get out of here. You can give him like a... Where am I? Unit, Faulty Body. Give him Spikes 40. Fragile doesn't matter because he has 1 HP. You just give him a bunch of mixes to get a bunch of Reanimate. You can make him a Vessel for something like Tome of Horrors to clear out waves and like the Unstable Reaction card. Just put a bunch of Reanimate on him, a bunch of Unstable on him, a bunch of Spikes on him, and he's just a unit that can often clear waves really efficiently. Organ Harvester, give him more Reanimate whenever he kills stuff with Spikes or something like that. He's also a great target for a card that I basically never take, Brain Transfer, which is interesting. He can basically give all of his Reanimate to your frontline tank, something like a Hulking Mass or something like that. He transfers all his Reanimate to whatever else you need him. He's a very weird unit. He has a lot more uses than you might think at first. I oftentimes feel like I maybe even miss a lot of what I can do with him. You can also make him like a tank. He probably is pretty good with that Reanimation Lab and also the Electricity Chamber. Give him a bunch of spikes or stats on Reanimate. Even on a floor, he just makes for a really solid tank. Just having 16 Reanimate with Dualism, that'll just keep you alive for a while. You know, this clan is really hurting for tanks, but yeah. This is an interesting one. I haven't used this guy a ton. I still do think you need to find like something for him though. You need to find like some kind of Reanimate with mixes, or you need to find Tome of Horrors, or you need to find Faulty Body, you know, something like that. You'll probably find something, but it's sort of like a chicken and egg problem with him, where it's hard to add him a lot of the time because you don't know if you'll see anything useful for him, or if you did see something useful for him, you often have a better target for that stuff, or you already have a target for it and you don't need him. But a lot of the time he is quite useful. I just think that he needs something. I don't know. I don't have a ton of experience with him. He was one of the last cards I ended up mastering because I just never saw him. I could see an argument for him being strong. Like, I could definitely see it. I feel like his floor is pretty high. He just makes for a really solid tank. You do need some kind of a way to weaponize him, though, I find. I don't know. I feel like I'm not giving him enough credit. I feel like it's this thing where like I'm missing a lot of what I can do with him a lot of the time. It's just so hard to see all of the things you can do with him. I feel like I'll give him the benefit of the doubt and put him in strong because I feel like he probably should be in strong. And finally we have Reforming Ooze, 1 Ember, 2 Space, 7/15 with Reanimate 1, and whenever he gets reanimated he gets 6 attack permanently. So 6 attack is a lot. That's more like it. That's a lot better than 2 from Overgorger. This guy can get to pretty crazy numbers. Like, you'd be surprised. It's actually pretty easy, especially with mixes, to stack up tons of Reanimate on him and just really get him going. I've had this guy get to 400, 500, 600 attack in runs. He is maybe a little bit multi-strike reliant, yeah, but very solid carry once you get him scaled up. He is weak to start the run. Like, he doesn't really do anything at the start of a run, but he's pretty cheap and low investment. You can often just kind of stick him somewhere and let him die a couple times every fight, and then just be doing something else while he's sort of ramping up. The only problem is that you do need some kind of reanimate, which often means you do need mixes. Not always, but I think enough that I am going to say that he's situational. You know, you can get Forevermore Serum, you get Pseudoscience, which is a little bit unreliable. There is other ways to give him reanimate, but it's a lot of time it's going to rely on secret ingredient mixes. But he's very, very strong when you do get in that. So I do have him situational. He could be here, but I think he is a little bit dependent on seeing that reanimate. Like, which is not really a guarantee at all when you have assistance. But very, very strong carry at late game. And he's a little bit weak early game too, which is probably what hurts him a little bit. But anyway, finally on to our last clan here. And that is going to be Melting Remnant. There we go. Bounty Stalker, 1 Ember, 2 Space, 10-5 unit. He has Stealth 1 and Extinguish plus 8 attack permanently. There we go. Once again, 8 attack. I like that a lot more than 2. So this is an interesting one. He starts with Stealth, so he always gets to attack whenever you play him. The ideal thing to do with this guy is either to 1, give him Endless, or 2, play him with Primitive Molds and just reform him constantly. He comes down with Stealth 1, he does his attack, he kills whatever, and then next turn he unstealths, and then he gets killed. And then you either bring him back with Endless the turn after that, or with Reform or whatever, and he comes back 8 attack stronger. If you see this guy pretty decently early on in a run, he's probably just going to carry you single-handedly. You know, I think he is a little bit multi-strike reliant too. I think he probably does want multi-strike basically always, but you probably can get away with not necessarily giving him multi-strike. It is definitely a lot weaker. But what you want to do with this guy is just make 2 or 3 copies of him. Once you have him with his Endless plus Burnout 1, or you have his multi-strike and Burnout 1, or whatever you want to give him. And you just end up making a couple copies of him and just sticking him on a bunch of different floors, and he just one-shots all the enemies from all the waves, and just he clears out waves. And the only thing you have to be careful with him is that he can be a little bit dicey against bosses if he doesn't have that 1 stack of stealth, or you don't have something to like chump block for him in the relentless phase. But he'll solo the game a lot of times if you see him early enough. And he will most of the time. I think it's not always. You do need to have some kind of reform or fine line list or something, or you can't find him like super late either, so I am going to put him in strong. I think he's better than situational because you're usually going to find something for him. It's just that a lot of the time, you know, you see him late, or you just happen to not really be able to do this, or you don't have the reforms or whatever, you're doing something completely different. He's not super universal, so I'll put him in strong, but he is going to carry the run for you a lot of the time. I don't think he's really breaking the rules or anything. He's just a unit that scales really high. That's it. He has his problems, so he's not breaking the game at all, but he's pretty consistently very strong. Now you have Big Sludge, 2 Ember, 3 Space, 1030 with Harvest, gain Rage 5. So this guy, fun unit. He's pretty resource intensive, but Rage 5 is a lot of Harvest to gain. Or a lot of Rage to gain. That's 10 attack for every Harvest. You'll often be getting, I don't know, maybe somewhere between 10 to 20 Harvest, which is, you know, 50 to 100 Rage, which is like 100 to 200 attack. So you give him multi-strike, another maybe kind of multi-strike reliant unit, but again, not always. And his attack is very high very quickly. You do want to play him with some kind of tombs or something, or dregs to get the ball rolling on the Harvest. So you do need something like that. You also maybe need to find either a smidge, or you need to take a space upgrade, which is something you want to do on melting anyway, so not a huge deal. But yeah, ultimately I do find this guy to just be a very solid carry unit. He has 30 HP, which is pretty high. I wasn't crazy about this guy in Monster Train 1. I did find he was very resource intensive for what he did. And he's very multi-strike reliant. And these days the one big hit thing kind of is better. So this guy is a nice unit to just scale really quickly, which is something melting can I kind of have a problem with. A lot of their scaling is kind of backloaded during a combat, and this guy can really help you get there faster. He's another strong unit, another very strong harvest unit. His attack definitely scales better than the Baron, the Harvest Baron, the Wickless Baron. He gains basically double the amount of attack, but no health. But he starts with a little more health, but he's also much more resource intensive. I don't think he's as good as this Baron, generally speaking, but he does at least scale his attack a lot faster, which is something that can be pretty nice. Very nice heavy killing potential and boss killing potential. Not breaking any kind of rules. Just a solid, consistent unit. You're often able to proc harvest in some way. Like, he's not really situational. So you're often able to harvest something. And you don't need much to really get this guy off the ground. So yeah, I really like him. Another very strong carry unit. Finally, for our last unit, we have the Legion of Wax, 2 Ember, 4 space, 8/8 with Extinguish, summon 2 Twin of Wax, and apply this unit's upgrades and stat changes. What that basically means is it summons 2 4/4 units that keep any shop upgrades, so multi-strike quick, things like that, and stat changes. So if you gave him a Wicklash to give him plus 10 attack, then both of those Twin of Wax will also have plus 10 attack. So they're normally 4/4, so there would be 10/4. And then those Twin of Wax extinguish into 2 Motes of Wax with the same thing, where you apply all the stat changes and unit upgrades. So basically he's an 8/8 that splits into a 4/4 that splits into a 2/2. And if you gave him 10 attack with something, you know, he's 18/8, he splits into 14/4, he splits into 12/2, and he's like a what are they called? Matryoshka doll? Is that what it is? They just keep splitting. It's a very interesting unit. It's super hard to evaluate. I think that this guy probably did get hurt by the lack of infusions now. He used to be really good to infuse with like a, I don't know, like a entombed explosive to, you know, get the explosion anytime one of the motes died, because he carried over the infusions from Monster Train 1. All of his twins and motes carried the infusions, so you'd make a lot of money with him with the Wickless Tycoon infusion and things like that. There's a lot of fun stuff you can do with him in the first game. In this game, not so much. But I don't want to say that he's bad. I found the best success with him to be to give him a Smidge Stone and then to stick him in front of any kind of Baron or Harvest unit. And you get a ton of harvest. You get 7 harvests from this guy. You want to give him like Burnout 1 usually. You can give him like Multi-Strike 2, and if you can reform him a lot with something, or you can reform him a lot with like Hollowed Halls. He's a great Hollowed Halls target. You know, all of those motes keep the stacks, and if you can get him with Hollowed Halls, he basically dies into the twins, and then it also resummons him. So you have like a bunch of units on the floor, because you can reform him while he's split. So once the 8/8 dies into the 4/4, you can reform the 8/8 and also play the 8/8 if you have room for it, which you're probably not going to unless you have Smidge. But that's both a good and a bad thing for this unit, because a lot of time if you're playing primitive molds and you're trying to reform something and you end up reforming this guy and you don't have room to play him, and it's like, well, now I can't play him. Now I have to redraw through my deck to get to him again if I want to play him again. So that can be a bit of a pain. I don't know. It's a very strange unit. Ultimately, I'm just going to call him situational. He's situationally good, like I said, with the Harvests and Smidgestone, or he can just be something that just kind of sits around and exists on a floor to kind of bait the boss or to prevent amalgam damage. He's very sticky, so he's very hard to like fully kill to get off the floor. If you have him with Burnout and you have like certain artifacts, like the one that explodes for 5 damage whenever a Burnout unit dies, he has a lot of little interesting uses, but I don't think any of them are like going to like win you the game or like break any kind of rules or anything. I think he's just like occasionally a nice unit to have, but usually not. Usually he's one that's like kind of hard to make it work because he is pretty resource intensive, so I am going to stick him in situational. Okay, so that's it. That's what it looks like. Pretty balanced overall. This is the rare units tier list. Let me know how I did in the comments, how wrong I am, how Bulmabello is your favorite unit, you're the president of the Bulmabello fan club, or maybe you hate Wilting Sapwood still. He hurt you so much in Monster Train 1 that you can't forgive him for how bad he was. Let me know. I hope you enjoyed watching. Thank you for watching, and that'll be all. Thank you.